So the good news is not many people showed up because this is really simple. There's no problems at all with how our book intersects with politics, and it has nothing to do with today.
And there's no potluck later.
Yeah, no potluck later. Right? Politics hardly enters into the discussion about racial issues in America, does it?
No.
I want to share my screen so you can see this picture. This is the one that the author referred to. The picture of John C. Calhoun and the January 6th insurgent that came in carrying the stars and bars.
They don't know they lost.
They don't know they lost. And I think, Don, it has to do with what this chapter talks about. Let me get out of here so we can see Judy's face again.
Well, it also has to do with after, you know, in Germany, after Hitler and stuff, they did a whole thing where they built monuments. You know, it's like the Nazis were put down, you know, it's like they studied that history and stuff. And in this country, nobody told the South they lost.
That's right. The losers lost in World War II. In the Civil War, we chose to not let them lose. Now, I admire that in some ways, in that, you know, it's good to not push a winning hand, but at what expense? And I think that's what part of what we're paying.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. I do hear. Who's that?
So
For here.
let me show this picture again so everyone can see it, just in case you hadn't seen it. This is the picture that they referred to from January 6th.
Mm-hmm, of course, that smile compared to what else.
Yeah, yeah. But just to, yeah, just their visiting, carrying insurgency.
Yeah, right.
Things.
Yeah, right. Basically all the hate they could muster up inside, outside.
Yeah.
Visually. Oh, yes. Mhm.
And pooping in the hallways.
Yeah. And so I think it comes down to, and this is I think the point that the author is trying to make, is that they've told a story for more than 100 years that says whether I'm wrong, I'm right. That you're always wrong because I'm the correct answer. And they can't see anything different. And doesn't that feel exactly like what we're dealing with today? It's people saying that no matter what, this group is right and that group is wrong.
In the South, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
In the South, it is not called the Civil War. It is either called the recent unpleasantness or the War of Northern Aggression.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So the North is always wrong, whether or not they don't question themselves, they question the other.
Yeah, I live there, and there's stars and bars on every other house.
I believe you.
I believe still
But I
today.
had not never heard that.
Yeah.
I haven't either, but I believe you.
Yeah, either the recent unpleasantness or the War of Northern Aggression.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if we look just at what's dividing the United Methodist Church, which I believe is the very same issue. You know, the United Methodist Church, the Methodist Church at the time split prior to the Civil War, came back together in the late 1930s, and I think never quite made a union, even though we were together, you know, for 80 years again, but we remained, I think, two denominations within one, the North and the South Methodist churches. And so the splitting that's going on here is just a re-splitting of what happened there. And it comes down to the same type of things. that they're right, whether or not anyone else believes them.
So we were the pseudo United Methodist.
We
Church.
were the pseudo United Methodist Church.
So then you have to think, where does that leave you today?
Here's,
Well, pretty much we know where we are.
yeah, that's right. Here's the really good news, is that, that split off is about 2,000 congregations out of 130,000, something like that. Something, I might have that number wrong, but it's a relatively small percentage. But in the places where it's split off, in the two south jurisdictions, sometimes it's major. There are a couple of the conferences in Texas split off more than 75% of their churches. Right? And so they if you only listen to the same thing you're already listening to, then you think you're right, because everyone else is saying you're right still. And how do we hear something bigger than that? Because I think what his point here is John C. Calhoun was so definitive about his correctness, that he had the right way of seeing things, that he didn't have to listen to anything else, no matter how much everyone else agreed with him, no matter how illustrious everything else was. And how much does that bespeak our present politics? Right? Marjorie Taylor Greene is absolutely convinced she's right, even though from any rational perspective, it's pure nonsense she's spouting out. How do we have conversation about that? And how do we, especially in something like racial issues, have any kind of conversation that's even close to productive?
Background briefing yesterday, I generally listen to background briefing with Ian Masters. He's on 4 days a week. Fabulous program. Psychologist, sociologist, he has on full spectrum. And basically they were saying, when you've got one person who isn't looking at reality, they're quote unquote insane. But when you've got thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, you've got a cult. And basically you are not ever going to reach them intellectually. You are never going to reach them through any that they have found. I mean, these are professional people. And they said, you know, it's just something where you can reach them. They said, we haven't found a way to reach them. It's divine intervention.
It's called divine intervention.
National intervention.
Yeah, but they're really good. Background briefing. Yeah, with Ian Masters, and you just pull it up on Google,
Yeah. The hard part is
just like with Amy Goodman.
the hard part is that the word cult has been so pejoratively used through the ages that it's often used like a hammer about anybody you don't like. And they call us a cult, we call them a cult, so which one's right? And what do we do when we're so far apart that all we see is the wrongness of the other people?
Well, they were talking about facts yesterday, actually denying what you intellectually and visually see.
Yeah.
Right, the 6th of January.
Like yesterday.
They said you're denying your own reality. That's insanity when you're denying your own reality.
Yeah, yeah.
So
But
there
they tell
you
us,
go.
but they tell it so strongly. I'm amazed, for example, about January 6th, that some people can say it was just tourists walking through.
Well, a lot of those people don't, really believe what they're saying. It's by saying those things, they're trying to win an argument.
Yeah.
And, you know, I used to really enjoy arguing back when I was in high school and early in 20s. And I realized that I could take on any point of view and most of the time win. And well, so what? What it did was put off people talking to me.
Yeah.
And so they're not interested in talking to us. They're going to just deny and so on.
Okay, so let me tell you. As I've gone further in this book. I used to believe more along what you just said. That they absolutely knew what they were doing. And I thought that all the people back in slavery days understood how wrong they were, and they kept doing that because of whatever. I'm not as convinced about that as I go further along.
No, and I wouldn't say all, or I wouldn't even hazard a guess on percentage. I'm just saying some of the people, and some of those are in leadership positions.
Yeah.
Are going to say they know they're incorrect. It's been documented, a whole bunch of them did that, and behind the scenes they were saying, Biden won, and yet they were saying because they didn't care about what was the truth.
Yeah.
Well, you just, really fixed your own argument, because Fox News said it's not about the truth. We'll lose people if we tell them really what's going on. So we'll just lie to them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you just.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, I think there's some of that, but the more I read through here and think about it, the more I'm convinced that they've told a story so often that they believe the story.
And I absolutely believe that there's a whole bunch of people that believe, whatever they've been told because they've heard it so much.
Yeah.
And this started at the beginning. This is 1619. It started there.
Yeah.
Here's these lesser people, they're gonna be our slaves.
Yeah,
And they bought into it and believed it. And it's just, it's what people do, unfortunately.
Yeah, and this doctrine, John C. Calhoun's doctrine of nullification, that, essentially we don't have to listen to some. Right? That this is the voice I have to listen to. What an interesting thing to be able to say. But if you look at our history, for years we said we don't have to listen to women's voices in politics. So why are we surprised that there's a whole lot of other people that are left out of
what
that
a great
conversation?
example. Yeah, what a great example.
Right? That their voice is null and void, whoever the they are. Judy, you were going to say something a little while ago.
And I was just gonna say, since the founding of the country, the very beginnings start with that. It's like the Constitution.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything. We founded this country by exterminating indigenous people and enslaving blacks. That was from the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
And it's written, it's etched in our very DNA. Is what I love that phrase, because it really does speak to what a great deal of this country still is based on.
So, my dad had a picture on his wall of one beef, a heifer, and like 7 calves around it. And he said, Doc's dream, because his dream was to have more calves from less cows. He used selective breeding to do that. Right? He did a lot of stuff to make it so that the breeding was more effective. And I think in some ways that's what we have to do, is we have to selectively breed this out of ourselves. If it's in our DNA, it is up to us to breed it out of the DNA and figure out what is putting it in. And figure out what to do about that. So who do we stop from reproducing? Right? It's really easy in politics to identify some of them, right? Mitch McConnell is a simple example. How do we breed him out of the political world? Because he has stood in that space for the last 20 years, stood in the space of saying, unless I get my way, nothing happens. I'm willing to tear it all down. How do we change that?
It started with his Kentucky Wildcats got beaten by a team of black boys.
Isn't that interesting?
From
Right.
Texas, and which Texas school was it? It was in El Paso.
El Paso.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's called Texas Western at the time.
And he broke the rule, the coach did, because he's only supposed to play one black player. And that was kind of what was, agreed non-verbally, that you never played more than one black player on your team. And so this coach,
Too much of an advantage.
this coach, played the best players, and he beat Kentucky.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Well, when I went to University of Kentucky back like 3 or 4 lifetimes ago, it was 1968 to 72. Rupp was the coach, and there were no blacks allowed on that team. It was, if you go back, it was all white.
yeah,
I mean, there was no black basketball players or football players allowed in Kentucky back then. And I remember then too, it's like my first husband, we're talking about ancient history. He was a paramedic and we were gonna move to Spartanburg, South Carolina. And we went down there, rented a house, and he got the job and stuff. And we went and a neighbor came over and talked to us that night and said, well, you'll be happy here because we have the white pool and the N-word have theirs. We unrented the house that night, moved back to Kentucky. I'm like, I can't live there. I couldn't, I mean, Kentucky is not exactly, you know, I mean, Lexington was at least a college town, so it was a little more. But I wasn't used to that kind of extreme kind of just, oh my God, I just thought I couldn't live there.
yeah. And you know what, I'm not gonna say this in order to blame you, Judy, because I understand exactly what you're saying. But the more we move out, the more inbreeding work happens, right? And they hear the very same story over and over and over again. And so they assume it's true because everyone's saying it.
But what's happened in the South is the opposite. People are moving in there and it is changing.
Yeah, and that's what, and that is gonna be ultimately what has to happen is that somehow this that has now lasted for 400 years, a story that has continued and continued, somehow it has to change into a different story.
That's why Atlanta is the way it is.
The what?
That's why Atlanta
Yeah,
is blue.
Yeah.
But not Georgia.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, look at what just happened in Wisconsin yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, looks positive,
Right.
looks positive.
Except.
But the Republicans know too, but the secret sauce to all this is your education. So you ban books, you don't allow certain things to be taught in schools. You know, that way you have a whole, you know, you keep you have a new generation that has the same beliefs you do.
And how is it that they don't see that as an act of fear? Because essentially they're saying that's gonna pollute our kids, and so we can't have that around. And if your stuff is so good, why are you afraid of something else being around?
Yeah, because basically down deep, they don't believe it. They don't believe in their own power. Basically, you know.
That their story doesn't have enough on its own.
Take away their power and their control and basically take away their country and their whiteness.
well,
That's another thing, their whiteness.
that's, I think, one of the biggest parts of it is some people are really fearful and they want their whiteness to dominate because God said that should happen or whatever reason they have. And they somehow, some of them believe it and some of them are just fearful because if the being white's so great, then you wouldn't have to worry about it. But we're not any better than anyone else, but they're fearful because they secretly understand it.
The thing is, what they're saying is they hate science. Basically, the only reason people are lighter and darker is because of how much melatonin you have in your blood chemistry. That's the only difference that makes some people lighter, some people darker. Some people are, I mean, it's just chemical. So they're saying they hate chemicals and they hate science. so they hate themselves. That's my feeling about it. You know, it makes absolutely no rational sense whatsoever.
Sure, but it does in their mind, and that's the problem. All of this stuff, that's why I'm glad that she spent time talking about John C. Calhoun, so we could see at least one strand of why people set that in place. And it was pretty pejorative to my way of thinking. How is it that, you know, he explains away that slavery isn't really bad because,
Yeah.
right? He explains away how slavery is no worse than the other economic systems that keep people at a low pay scale. And the reality is that's true. Not that it's no worse, but keeping people at a low pay scale and just barely paying sustenance living isn't a good example of better economy. Right?
And he's not living that way. He's living on the top
Yeah.
1/10 of 1% of the world.
But what I'm saying is if I look at Don and I can see enough things wrong with his system, then I have justification for why my system is better. Right? Even if it's not better, I found so many flaws there that I convinced myself it is.
That's how you win silly arguments when you aren't even right.
Yeah.
Is you use things like that.
Yeah.
And you try to use the other person's stuff to beat them up with that and prove that you're right.
Yeah.
So, I try to be informed. I was trying to think if there was four, but one I used to say just logic and science, but experience, and there was another thing. Oh, myth. That I try to be informed by those four items, and people that discount science and logic,
Have nothing left but the myth.
then there's nothing much you can do about that.
Sure. But let's talk about myth, for example. That word in most uninformed circles becomes just your fable that you made up. And so anything you have as your myth gets written off. But I don't see my myth as being a myth, if that makes sense. I see it as truth. But the reality is most of our stories, whatever they are, especially if they're based in religion of some sort or another, are mythical stories, right? That we've built into hard truth, you know, facts that can't, you know, that have basis in reality, not just in mythology. And we don't realize how much we wrote those stories ourselves.
My own stories are myths.
All of our stories are myths. Very few of them are based in pure fact. Not that we don't have some facts in there. So if we look back at the Jesus myth, there was a man named Jesus who lived. Now, how much of what happened in that, in the stories that we have about him, is true and how much is mythical? We don't know.
Mostly mythical.
Maybe it's a bunch of men that lived back there, and they just wound it up into this one man called Jesus.
Maybe.
Maybe this guy never lived, maybe it was just a bunch of fantasy tales back then, we don't know, we weren't back there. We
Yeah.
have no idea.
And bottom line though is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if like if Jesus or Jeremiah or Moses were real people, or if they were mythical people whose stories got brought forward. Because if we're looking for facts, and we're looking for truth, they don't have to be the same.
Yeah, you know.
Truth doesn't denote fact. But we turn it, if we go back to slavery, we turn it into a factual based thing. I'm the one who can think clearer, and so they shouldn't get the vote to overturn me because I'm more in the factual thinking space than what they are.
And you can tell by looking at me, I'm white.
Yeah, and I'm wealthy, and I have education, and whatever it happens to be, that someone who is whatever it is that I'm defining as not me, somehow is less capable of. And looking around any room, we could define some ways that somebody is lesser than. There's 4 of us in here, for example, that are wearing glasses, and 5 counting Judy. And so Don, you're the lesser. No, don't all of a sudden put on airs about how you're as good as us.
So my sister reminded me of what our dad said to us. And he said, remember, no one's better than you. And he said, and remember, you're no better than anyone else.
Yeah. But when the rubber hits the road, that's really hard to live. Because we know whatever my thought patterns are better, or I think my thought patterns are better because I know them and I see how they work better than what I know and see yours. So it's easier for me to see how yours are not working well, or how you have flaws in them. Where my own, I've thought through enough that I think I've chosen the perfect course.
I believe I mostly think I'm no better than anyone else. And no one's better than me. And it doesn't have anything to do with glasses or thought processes. It's a different level.
Yeah.
And I think, that's what this is about.
But the big question, I think that we're really at the core of all this is, how do we move into a world that doesn't always have that view? How do we move into a world that's defined by Southern slavery standards that says some people are better, some people are worse. Some people don't have, by whatever way you measure it, enough intelligence, enough enough mental ability, enough moral ability that they should get to have the same space as me. And how do we sit in a space where those kinds of alternate realities are true in a lot of people's minds? What do we do?
I went to the San Luis Bell Center when I lived in LA. The Holocaust Center there,
Yeah,
before you can even go through the main door for the whole thing, you are required to sit out there to come to grips with your own hatred and your own inadequacies.
Yeah.
And you sit there and you think about, what is it that I'm carrying around and putting out there to make this place possible based on what happened during World War II. I mean, you have to sit there and come to grips with yourself before you can even go through the main door.
but
You
don't
sit there.
But don't we all find it easier to place hatred, bigotry, whatever in somebody else? Right?
Well, see, that's
To project
it,
in that direction.
you know. And we all sit there. My main thing was very, very religious people violently turned me off.
Right.
That is,
Yeah.
that's where, to this day, that's really what it's all about. Just listening to the news, what's going on in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Got 3 holidays there right now, 3 major holidays, and they're all killing each other off.
And the more example of that reinforces your truth, the easier it is to hold on to that truth,
Right, of course.
right?
Mhm.
You were saying something.
Oh, I just said that, they bombed
Oh, the mosque, well, there was the
mosque.
mosque,
Yeah,
and then there was. Yeah, into southern Israel, they had bombs going off, and then retaliation,
yeah,
and then we've got Easter coming up, Easter Sunday, I guess, is this Sunday. And Passover is tonight. I mean, the whole thing is insane.
Yeah.
But I think it has more to do with power and control than it does religion. I think religion's a component, but it's power, control,
yes.
Yeah.
and basically resources worldwide. Resources.
He ended the chapter with these words: the price of equality, or at least the promise of an equal society, is vigilance against those who would make government the tool of hierarchy. Meaning essentially whatever ways that we order us, right? That white is better than black, that Christian is better than Muslim, that whatever it is where we order something at the top and something below it. that we make government follow the rules that says that's true. And it's hard for us not to, because it's really easy to say, the United States was founded as a Christian nation. But for some people, that means, and all the rest you have to get out,
Mhm.
right? Because even if it has historic truth, it doesn't have, that doesn't mean that's how we should order our government. And because that's making it subjective to that hierarchy.
Christian nationalists terrify me.
Yeah,
I'll take
absolutely.
I'll take a black dude sitting right here before I'll take a Christian nationalist.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well, my feeling is it's the energy of the person.
Yeah.
I feel very, very lonely because being in LA and all these people I used to hang out with. In a room full of black people. And I've gone to weddings, I mean, you name it, but in a group generally, not here, but generally, it's all white. Somebody's gonna say something and I know I'm gonna say something and it's not gonna wind up good. And I thought I'm ill at ease in a whole group of white people. That's me though. That's me.
Well, it's awareness. It's
Mhm.
awareness of.
'Cause I
when you
know-
get that many white people together,
Somebody's gonna say
general
something.
setting, that there's gonna be a bunch of people that
Mhm.
think that way that you are uncomfortable with.
Yeah, right,
There's
exactly.
no monitor.
Yeah, and they assume you think the same way they
Yeah.
do.
Mhm.
We all look alike here, so I can say anything I choose.
Yeah, because you're obviously you look like me, so you're gonna think like I do.
Yeah, or you're in this group, so why would you be in this group if you
Yeah.
didn't agree with? Yeah.
But that's not just this group. One of the one of the South Carolina political things is Jim Clyburn.
Oh, okay.
And he's been a representative in Congress for decades. He's gonna die pretty soon, but not soon enough. And he has the say in any group of black people in South Carolina. He puts his thumb on the scale. And that's not how you phrase it in South Carolina. In South Carolina, it is the House N-word telling the field N-words what to do.
interesting.
And they follow him like sheep.
Yeah.
And
But because he looks so like Parker,
Jim Clyburn's black,
that's what I meant.
okay, and black women are supposed to be the backbone of the Democratic Party. But whatever he says, they're gonna follow along. Right now right now everybody is electing their state
Mhm.
Democratic representative. We've already done ours here. But they're still in the running there. And one of the people that's running is a good friend of mine, Crystal Spain. And I would support her no matter what. But I got really annoyed yesterday when Jim Clyburn put his thumb on the scale for her election. Because Crystal could take it on her own merits. She doesn't need him
Mhm.
coming in and at the last minute, and it is a last minute endorsement, because she had endorsements 2 weeks ago from all over the state. But he came in yesterday and put his thumb on the scale.
So he can claim victory.
So you can claim it.
Yeah.
But
Just-
that's the difficulty of politics, is politics runs according to different rules and what are really best for our interaction, right? Because they're based on winning and losing. And I'm not saying that, what?
Not relationship.
Not relationship. Relationship is used as a tool to subordinate to the winning and losing. And, how do we change that conversation in a system that depends on the winning and losing? And he makes a very strong case in this chapter about how the Constitution itself was molded the laws passed post-constitution were molded, make it so that minority rules majority. Look at United States Senate. That can't pass a thing because we have to get a 60% majority because of the filibuster rule.
Well, I think one of the answers is if the Democrat Party would move to the middle, I think, things would really change.
Well, we're in the middle, and you can see what the mess is. Oh, I totally
No,
disagree.
I mean, politically, not get off too far to the left, get to the middle,
Oh, no.
because that's a thing that can make the difference and make changes.
Mhm, yeah.
They
I don't
keep
see
moving,
any
right,
changes.
they keep moving the middle.
Yeah.
That's
Middle, and we're sinking in the middle, the sinkhole,
Yeah.
right in the middle.
Yeah, I don't disagree that the middle is a good place because that's what brings people from both sides together. But you're right now, the right is moving further and further right. And so our response has been, well, let me get closer to. And so I think that the left has been forced into moving further and further into what used to be Republican territory, instead of being true to what is best about.
Well, Bernie Sanders is not doing that. I mean, he's
Yeah.
sticking to what his belief system is.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's others out there too that are doing the same thing.
Already.
I didn't hear.
Bernie Sanders, he's sticking to what he believes, and he stands up there and he makes
Yeah.
statements.
Yeah.
He's not intimidated.
Yeah.
I don't see why anybody should be. My feeling is.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, then what do? How do you get to this place where, things get done the way you?
How do we get back to rational conversation and argument rather than partisan?
Yeah.
Winning and losing.
Rational, scientific. Maybe I need to leave the other two out, but yeah.
Yeah, but somehow we have to have those kinds of conversations, and we have to expect those kinds of conversations. In the last 10 years in the Arizona legislature, for example, it's been probably 15 years now. It's been basically, I'm not going to listen to you. I had a really good friend of mine named Liz Pancrazzi. Liz, I did both her parents' funerals. Right, she lived across the street from me. She served for years in the legislature, both House and Senate here, Arizona. And she would tell me, they just don't have conversation. They don't care. They don't want to have a conversation.
And it's pretty hard to have a conversation with the attitudes. Which, you know, it's, you know, if you denigrate everyone that you don't agree with, then nobody can have a conversation. If you can still have a relationship with someone that you disagree with.
Yeah.
But if you choose not to, then there's not much hope at all.
But
There,
the hard part is the more they denigrate me, the more I want to denigrate. You know, and it's a terrible spiral that just goes further and further downhill.
I think as far as political solutions go, there are two things that would help. One is popular vote for the president, but the other one that really could hit close to home is ranked choice voting. I think that there's something about those barriers that you have to break your own mental barrier in order to rank choice vote.
Think about how scary that is to those conservative.
Well, yeah, they just shot it down in Phoenix.
It's really scary that maybe I'll lose my power.
But if it could be engineered politically, I think that that's
Yeah.
a potential solution.
But what's interesting about your statement just now though, Don, is do they really lose power or do they lose power as they understand it?
As they understand it.
And do they have to move more into relational power rather than political power?
It's about not always getting your way. You know, we're pretty unhappy to not get our way about this because it's just dead wrong. And, somehow they come up with the same idea that what we're doing is dead wrong, and there's not much, rational thought in terms of that, or scientific thought in terms of that.
When do we have the right voting go?
After they count all the votes. If no one is a clear winner, I don't know by what percentage, but if no one is a clear winner. They look at all of the votes for everybody else and redistribute them.
You know, who comes in at the higher levels and who's running.
You don't just say, I vote for so-and-so, you rank, you see, so-and-so is my first choice, so-and-so is my
Yeah,
second,
right.
so-and-so is my third.
So they have to go back and look at the ballots again. To see, like say Katie Hobbs wasn't a clear winner, then they would go back and look at all of the ballots. That didn't have Katie Hobbs first and see how many of them had Katie Hobbs for second.
So you vote for 3 people or?
It depends on.
I think you can set it up however you
How
want
many
to that way.
candidates there are.
Yeah, but what it means is somebody might get more votes than another person, but then on most of the rest of the ballots ends up in last place. They wouldn't win because the majority of people that ranked them higher, first, second, third,
Yeah,
so
so
rank somebody else higher.
the first choice, if they're more than 50%, they're gonna win.
Yeah, there are no runoff elections with ranked choice vote.
Yeah, so it's like we used to do in school. When we were trying to come up with goals and resources. People would have first, second, third choices.
Yeah.
And those would get ranked.
Yeah, so it's a bit muddier. And, you know,
Takes longer to
it
count.
takes longer to count for sure. And I don't know how that would work in the midst of
You're right.
a system that is relatively clean, but already takes a whole lot of hits for messiness. Right, where people complain about it.
With computers, it wouldn't take any longer.
No, but Don, it does take longer, but that's not the issue.
Because the recount time. has to
Today
be-
our computers are counting our things more accurately than they've ever been counted. But we have more suspicion of voter fraud than we've ever had,
Yeah.
even though it's easier to show that it's not there.
And that is correct,
And-
or correct.
That's right, and would this open it up to even more instances of being able to say voter fraud?
It would.
It is nice that the first state that has tried this was a traditionally Republican state, Alaska. Right, and so we'll see how it spreads from there.
I thought other states had done it too. I know about Maricopa, but other states.
There's a New England state that does it. I know, I think I can't remember, it's Massachusetts or Connecticut, somewhere up in there. A New England state does it, I know. And the thing I like about it is it gets rid of the two-party system, kind of.
Yeah.
Or it makes it easier, it makes it less. Like, I don't like that you've either got a Republican or a Democrat to vote for, you know, it's like, we should have it more open. That's,
The question is how do we change all these different things in a system that we've decided is firm and fixed and can't be, you know,
But
messed?
we already have partial ranked choice voting when it comes to voting for our legislative representatives, because there are 2 of them. So when you see your ballot, it says pick 2.
Oh, right.
Well, that's ranked choice voting.
Yeah, it is, and it is there.
They just need to create a way to
Put it out a little bit further.
make it broader than just our
Yeah.
2.
What's happened to me is that in recent years, I'm really likely just to vote Democrat. And I didn't used to be that way.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that I've gotten there. And it has to do with a lot of the Republicans and how they're operating. And I just can't stomach it.
Sure, but know that many of your friends that are voting just Republican got there in somewhat of a similar way.
Except I'm right.
Yeah, they told lies while you told the truth.
That's right.
But that's the difficult part, is if we tell a certain story long enough, then we believe it, whether or not it has complete truth.
And that's really my point about this, is that's where I've ended up with that because of what I hear, and yeah, and the other side's, it's not, quite a mirror image because they're illogical.
Yeah.
But.
But a lot of it comes down to, as I read through this chapter, I think what her point was is that if we continue to say some people are 3/5 of a human being, whether we say those words or not, if it continues to be part of the narrative inside our heads, inside our political system, if some people have more value than other people, then ultimately we're a morally broken space.
So we've gotten there because people have continually stood up and said, what, this isn't right. This needs to shift. That's how we've gotten this far. And we won't get any further without people standing up and saying, that's wrong, this is right. And it's not an easy journey.
So we have 5 minutes left, so I want you to kind of think, what are you going to do to somehow move the needle in some way or another? Because the one thing that the last few years have taught us is that there's a lot of brokenness out there. How do we begin to deal with that brokenness, fix that brokenness, change that in some way or another?
I did my part decades ago. I'm sorry, but I'm in that anymore. I just, probably not gonna be me.
Oh, but all of us can do it in some way or another. Just the very fact that we vote continues
Yeah,
to let us
vote.
try to fix some of that. And maybe
And
that's
talking to,
right.
I'm not gonna talk, I'm sorry, I'm gonna talk to a Trumper.
Right.
I don't necessarily talk to a Trumper, but I pray about one. Well, I pray about Trump, you know, the trial going the way I want it to go.
Well, I think, I'm gonna spin that the brokenness is a good sign. Because, was it broken 70, 80 years ago? And, it's broken now because we are shifting and changing.
Yeah.
So there's a upside to the brokenness.
Yeah, it shows that something needs to be fixed.
That's right. So it's on some levels, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And, but we gotta keep talking to people. And I can understand why you wouldn't want to talk to someone that you can't really talk to.
Because it is really hard to have those conversations right now.
And you're not gonna, but you can talk to some people that you can talk to.
Yeah.
And that's worthwhile.
Yeah, what I'm certain of is, yeah,
Was that?
As long as the dialogue is open and you can
Yes.
exchange ideas.
Yeah.
If you're going up against, a brick wall, no.
but what I'm certain of is not everyone who votes Republican or even votes for Donald Trump is the people that are the worst of it. Does that make sense? But it's really easy to write that off that way. And so somehow we have to start saying, who is it that I can talk to that is somewhere in the middle?
I think voter registration and getting to young people. I think Maxwell Frost and David Hogue were wonderful. And the vote, when they parsed the vote in Wisconsin, they had the Gen, is it X or Z, whoever is the youngest ones? Z's, okay. The Gen Z's voted at the same percentages they did vote in the general election, in this one little special election. And of the Gen Zers who voted, 80% of them voted for that woman, voted for the right person, my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think that the more we can do to support young people who are considering running, to talk to young people about voting, to get them before it's in concrete.
So let me challenge you some. Why is it that too often we get hardened into a space as we get older? And we begin protecting ourselves more, right? Why are we able to see the progressive ideals at 30, but not at 50 or at 70? Why is it that we lose that ability? What happens?
We can see them at 50 and 70. Have you
Speak for yourself.
any rally?
No, I agree that we can. I agree that we can, but there's a whole bunch of people who used to be the hippie, who now, you know, and had very progressive ideas, who now is supporting complete Republican ideals. What happens to us as
When you start making money and you have
That's fine.
property and you want,
Sorry, go ahead, Judy.
You said when you start making.
I already,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I agree with her.
Yeah, money does corrupt us in politics.
I just wish I'd made more money.
yeah, I hear you, me too. I wish I wish teachers made a lot more money.
There's also an element of encouraging those young people, that's Meredith out there waiting for you.
Oh, yes,
That's what I went to check on,
Yeah.
because they looked lost.
yeah.
And here comes Jody.
And what are we gonna do after Z? What's the next letter?
What is it?
Double Z, maybe double Z.
There was a
CV
young,
top.
a young man.
Hello there.
Ended in adult ed a couple of weeks ago,
Yes,
and, he's a, East Indian descent, and he's doing all this research and stuff. And we said at the end, so when are you going, because he's heading now to Harvard Law School.
Okay.
Said, so when are you gonna run? And he said, I'm not, that's not anything I ever wanna do.
right,
And
and
he had, he had the communication skills,
Yeah.
the interest, the research, all of those things that would make him an ideal candidate to be able to speak coherently.
yeah,
And,
but doesn't that show some of his intelligence and sanity,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Anybody who runs for politics in some ways is a little bit daft,
A lot,
yeah.
having done.
So I have to go talk to these folks out here. I'm glad you almost solved politics,
yeah.
all right? Go on to the next chapter. One of the things that we need to look at as we go forward is we have 10 more chapters. I will not be here for 10 more weeks.
No, you said you're leaving in July.
Yeah, so you're gonna have to decide, do we want to combine chapters? Do we wanna only continue one a week? Think about how you might wanna structure it. Because we don't have to finish the book. I don't feel bad at all only getting up to chapter 12 or something.
Should we do?
But you can rank choice and talk about which ones. So think about that as you go forward, okay? And we'll structure that. But we'll plan on doing the next chapter this next week. All right?
Going back to read.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, guys.
Want to do is fine with me.